Diddy adopted a white child.
Tried to sacrifice me, but I ran away from there.
Because I am a great father, but I'm sleeping with the...
Why did one of the music industry's biggest moguls adopt a white girl? The courtroom fell silent as she stepped up to the stand, ready to expose secrets that could shatter his empire. What once seemed like a mysterious act of kindness is now spiraling into a web of dark allegations. And what she revealed about those infamous parties? You won't believe it.
My name's Ava. I'm a Scorpio.
No. What's your last name?
Ava Combs.
What's your other last name?
Ava Barone.
Eva Barone Combs. Diddy adopted a white child. I want you to tell them the story about how I adopted you. But you still have beautiful parents.
And he saw me and decided to pick me up and said to come inside and play with his kids.
Yeah.
Diddy presented me in front of his friends. I was very scared. He tried to sacrifice me, but I ran away from there.
What is a freak off? The freak off essentially was something that Cassie said she learned about through Sean Combs about a year into their relationship. He described it as voyeurism.
He had everything to do with what she was wearing. She said she would buy outfits from sex shops and see which one he wanted her to wear. And then inside the actual hotel rooms, their apartments where the freak-offs took place, she said that Combs was in charge of lighting. It began with candles. It then moved to studio lighting.
They might say she's lying, but that's going to be a little hard to do with that video.
The story doesn't begin with mansions or private jets. It starts in the quiet, unremarkable suburbs, in the life of a young girl worlds away from the glitz of Diddy's empire. Her name, barely known at the time, would later become the subject of whispered speculation, all beginning with a single unexpected encounter with one of the most powerful figures in music. At first, she was just another face in the crowd. Young, reserved, seemingly ordinary, but the events that led her into Diddy's orbit would ignite fierce debates around power, privilege, and hidden intent. It was at an exclusive, invite-only event, a gathering of the industry's elite, where she first caught his eye. The details of their initial meeting remain hazy. Some say she was working quietly behind the scenes as an assistant to a lesser-known name in the industry. Others claim she had simply tagged along as a guest, blending into the background of an opulent affair. Yet something about her stood out. Those present at the event began to notice. While others vied loudly for Diddy's attention, she somehow found herself in quieter, more intimate corners of conversation with him. She wasn't just out of place, she was magnetic in her stillness, capturing the attention of a man surrounded by louder, flashier contenders.
Step to the side. Step to the side, please.
Are you guys how do you go today?
Step to the side, please.
Watch out, watch your butt.
Big great. How can you bump it today? Congratulations at NYU check. Give us a little space. Give us a little space. Give us a little space. Go on, Nate.
Nice little just smile. Nice. That's
Step to the side, please.
like we let guy being by his great stuff. Yeah.
Wait.
Watch out. Give us a little space, please.
All right, sir.
Back to this one. Give us a little space.
Yeah. Oh,
Chuck it in here. Go ahead.
oh. Boss down down. When you're behind, he's burning it.
Back up. Sorry, back up.
Push you like first plate gotta work with right out of here. Just also
Hey, man, Sean, man, be good, bro.
What made this budding connection so startling was the sheer contrast of their worlds. She embodied none of the extravagance Diddy was known for. No celebrity lineage, no social media spotlight, no dramatic flair to command a room. She was, in every way, the antithesis of his high-profile life. Old, unnamed interviews with event staff and insiders described her in one word: vulnerable. A term that seemed to both explain her presence among the powerful and hint at why someone like Diddy might have taken interest. But no one, not even the most seasoned observers of celebrity behavior, could have predicted what came next. Her life was upended by a legal adoption. When Diddy announced it, the world blinked. A move so personal, so loaded with implications, and yet he offered almost no explanation. In a culture that thrives on image and narrative, his silence was deafening. He framed it as a selfless act, a gesture of care, rooted in personal values and a desire to give her better opportunities. But the questions came hard and fast. Why her? Why now? This was a media-savvy mogul who understood the weight of public perception, and his deliberate vagueness only fueled the fire. Rumors took off almost instantly. Some whispered that guilt was at play. perhaps linked to someone from her past. Others floated the idea that it was a PR strategy, a calculated move to reshape his public image during a crucial point in his career. But one theory, repeated often behind closed doors, was harder to ignore. That her innocence, her stark, almost jarring difference from the world Diddy occupied, wasn't incidental. It was the appeal. Her quietness, her vulnerability, in a world dominated by noise, became not a shield, but a magnet. Still, Diddy held firm in his narrative. He insisted it was nothing more than an act of generosity. He had the resources, and she deserved the chance. A new life, one only he could offer, but the cracks were already showing. The more people looked, the less it felt like a benevolent gesture, and more like the opening scene of a story far darker than anyone could have imagined.
The prosecution's star witness taking the stand, but it was more than that. It was how Cassie took that stand. You could hear a pin drop when those doors opened, and a visibly pregnant Cassie Ventura walking past a man she had not seen in 6.5 years. A man she says violently abused her for a decade. A man the prosecution said trafficked her. Well, she sat across from him, placed her overcoat behind her, turning her body slightly toward the jury, rubbing her pregnant belly throughout her testimony. Diddy, well, he was more fidgety than he was the day before. He was passing notes. He pushed himself away from the defense table and largely sat like that. They never seemed to make eye contact with one another, not even after she was crying about having loved him once and planning and participating in these freak-off sex parties because she feared him and she wanted to make him happy, but feeling worthless, feeling disgusting because she didn't want to do it. Now, with each moment, the testimony became more and more graphic. Her delivery, though, it never changed. It was matter of fact, steady, calm. At times, she was even critical of herself, walking us all through how a 10-album record deal came over a 10-year period of abuse and sexual humiliation.
Is he running an entertainment and fashion industry, or is he running essentially a criminal organization?
By the way, we have a poll up right now. You can participate in it. Do you think Cassie Ventura was a victim or partner in this? Ready for this? 82%. Well, this doesn't make sense. 82% say yes. I don't know if that's yes to, I think we need clarification. 82% say victim or partner. We'll get a clarification on that.
By the way,
right now.
But that's my answer to that question.
Oh, okay. 82% say victim. 82% say victim. Maybe based on we're reporting on the testimony right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think she is a victim if the allegations are true, but also she is involved in some of the criminal act. I mean, she's getting those prostitutes, right? She's making payments to them, allegedly. She's having them come. So she's involved in some of the alleged criminal activity. And that's an interesting point that wouldn't just apply to her. Other people in his orbit might be some combination of victim and co-conspirator.
But you know what? That video changes everything, because the argument would be, what do you think happens if she says no?
Yeah.
What do you think happens if she says, I'm not in the mood for a freak off tonight. I'm not going to pay the dancer. That's what's going to happen. That video is arguably the most important piece of evidence because it sets the stage when we're talking about coercion or fraud or force. Question from Angelina. How old was Cassie when they first started dating? I think she was 19 years old. So you're talking about a 17-year age difference. That's important. I think that's an important factor if you're talking about power and control, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that he's older and obviously has much more power anyway.
Sherry Williams asks, what kind of time is Diddy facing if he's found guilty?
You see how Albie Shore, he came out saying that Kim Porter death needs to be looked into?
I think that Al being his ex-wife, he have every right, knowing about the stuff that came out about Diddy and what he was doing. You understand what he has done in the past, and people have overlooked it. By him coming out and saying that he hoped that he could get her case reopened. There was a guy called John Paperwork, the Paperwork Party. They would put in an open petition to get Kim's case reopened. You understand what I'm saying? So I'll be sure doing this is showing that, you know, he still got love for Quincy's mother. He still want to find out the truth because allegedly Kim was fine the day before and the day of her death. And then now she found in the bed dead from pneumonia. That just don't sound right, bro. That don't sound right at all.
So you feel the same way about her death being suspect?
I don't think nobody in America thinks nothing suspicious about Kim's death, bro. If you are rich like that, you could, you know, Kim had, I think, a net worth of like, what, 12 million a year or something like that? Kim could have called any doctor to come over and look at her. If she was that bad, you know, she could have called an ambulance or something like that. Everything is suspicious about her death, bruh. And I don't think an autopsy was done on her. And if it was a half job.
You personally, right? What do you think happened to Kim Porter?
If I say something personal, bro, and my belief, and I put it on to the public.
The announcement came without warning. Sean Diddy Combs, a man whose life had been defined by spotlight, success, and spectacle, revealed to the world that he had adopted a teenage girl, one who appeared to share nothing in common with the world he ruled. In public statements and carefully framed interviews, Diddy described the decision with calm conviction. He spoke of her difficult upbringing, of wanting to offer her a better life, of acting out of compassion. But behind the words, something didn't sit right. The abruptness, the secrecy, the complete lack of any known connection between them. From the outside, the adoption seemed almost random. She wasn't a rising star, an industry protege, or a familiar face in Diddy's ever-expanding orbit. To the public, she was a complete unknown. Diddy asked for privacy. He kept details vague, speaking in generalities about opportunity and second chances. But the more he tried to quiet the noise, the louder the speculation became. Why her? Why now? The girl looked more like someone from a suburban cul-de-sac than the newest member of hip-hop royalty. And the public noticed. Reactions split quickly. Some applauded Diddy's decision, calling it selfless, a rare act of humility from a man best known for excess. But others were skeptical. They questioned his motives, calling the move performative or strategic, something meant to deflect, distract, or reinvent. Media outlets dove into the story. Articles began surfacing that questioned how the adoption had moved so quickly, with whispers of favors, loopholes, or backroom strings being pulled. Legal analysts pointed out that high-profile adoptions typically invite close scrutiny, especially when they appear rushed. And behind the scenes, industry insiders began to talk. Theories began to surface. Why was someone so far removed from Diddy's world, someone with no celebrity ties, no ambition for fame, suddenly placed at the center of his personal life? The girl's presence didn't just contrast Diddy's lifestyle, it challenged it. She didn't belong to the glittering narrative of power and wealth that had always surrounded him, and that's what made it all the more unsettling. Was her adoption a symbol of redemption, or a carefully constructed smokescreen? Still, Diddy stayed the course. He told anyone who would listen that it was about mentorship, about giving a young person a second chance. But even those noble claims left a trail of unease. Because the more he spoke, the more his explanations began to crack. The timelines didn't add up. The details were elusive. The motivations, no matter how often repeated, never fully answered the questions people were really asking. If his reasons were pure, why didn't they hold up under scrutiny? And more disturbingly, was there a truth even Diddy didn't want to face himself? As more layers began to peel back, the narrative of a generous adoption began to fade. What emerged instead was the beginning of something far more complicated, a puzzle with pieces that pointed directly into the shadows of Diddy's private world, and what lay ahead would not be easily explained away.
You guys remember Ava Baroni Combs, the video that we shared and talked about together?
Eva Baroni Combs? Yes, it was breaking news. Diddy adopted a white child.
On the streets, and then Papa Cone.
I did some digging around and found some old photos that go back many years. She was with him when she was very, very young, so she is in fact his adopted daughter. Some are saying this woman in the background here is her mother, but nothing is confirmed. You can see she's been with him in interviews, hanging out with Diddy's daughters. She was seen everywhere with Diddy's daughter. Here's another one. And I mean, they go way back. And here's a few more. So it shows that, yes, indeed, they spent time together and they grew up together. This is, in fact, their sister and Diddy's adopted daughter. However, I found a video that is so suspect. I want you guys to check it out and tell me what you think.
This is my life.
A lot of cars now.
This is because I am a great father, but I'm sleeping with the girl. Tell me, who do y'all have a crush on? Tell Daddy the truth.
I don't know about you guys, but that video and the way Diddy's acting raises so many questions. So many are asking, where's Ava Baroni Combs now?
For years, rumors about Diddy's infamous freak-off parties circulated in hushed tones, whispered behind closed doors, hinted at in tabloids, but never fully exposed. These events were cloaked in secrecy and defined by exclusivity. Some of the most powerful names in entertainment, politics, and business were said to attend. On the surface, they were celebrations of excess, lavish affairs held in opulent mansions, complete with world-class catering, live performances, and velvet rope guest lists. But beneath the glamour, darker allegations took shape. There were persistent murmurs of power imbalances, manipulation, and disturbing behind-the-scenes behavior. At first, the stories were dismissed as gossip, the kind of wild speculation that trails any high-profile figure like Diddy. But as her story began to unfold, those once dismissed rumors took on a new weight. According to former staff and associates, the most unsettling activity didn't happen in the open. It happened in the private rooms, tucked away from the main festivities. That's where the term freak-off originated. What began as whispered claims of adult consensual behavior slowly evolved into something more troubling. Some guests, it was alleged, were pressured or manipulated into situations they hadn't fully agreed to. Others hinted at coercion, blurred lines, and an unspoken culture of compliance. Still, for years, these claims were ignored, chalked up to disgruntled ex-employees or the fantasies of conspiracy theorists, until she began connecting the dots. What the girl discovered, through overheard conversations, photos, and documents, rattled her. It's still unclear whether her discoveries were accidental or the result of deliberate searching. But her testimony later confirmed one thing. She had seen enough to question everything about why she had been brought into Diddy's life. Insiders would later reveal that her unassuming nature, her vulnerability, and her stark contrast to Diddy's world may have been precisely why she was chosen. The timing of her adoption, once seen as bizarre but harmless, now appeared potentially strategic. Text messages, internal emails, anecdotes, preserved in court filings, all began to suggest that her inclusion in Diddy's inner circle may have served a deeper and far more disturbing purpose. It wasn't just about offering a young girl a better life. It was about control, optics, maybe even something worse. And while allegations had swirled around Diddy for years, the implication that this girl, so young, so removed from fame, had been swept into a world she never asked to enter, changed everything. Her discovery left her shaken. It pushed her to ask questions that the public was now asking too. And eventually, it brought her to the witness stand. Her courtroom testimony didn't just cast doubt on Diddy's motives. It challenged the carefully constructed image he had spent decades building. For the first time, the public wasn't just asking what, had happened at those parties. They were asking, who was Diddy really protecting? And why did he bring her into his world at all? The answers, finally beginning to surface, painted a picture far darker than anyone had imagined.
Well, see, I know two situations like that. See, Cassie told the story on the witness stand about how Puff and her was in a freak off, and then D-Rock intervened or whatever like that, and they masked themselves up in all black, took the guns out the safe, and went to find Suge. You know what I'm saying? Suge even spoke about he glad they didn't find him because a whole lot of other people would probably been dead then too, you know, if they would have found him. Now, she testified that, you know, Puff and D-Rock was going to try to, you know, unalive Suge. You know what I'm saying? Now, what I do know this, me and D-Rock had a conversation about why he's so close to Puff now. You understand? And he told me he was in a diner, Mel's Diner. I guess it was probably Mel's Diner. That's one of the diners that stay late open in California. He said that he was trapped in there and he ain't have no burners or nothing on him. He ain't have no guns, no nothing. He said he called Puff. Now, this is a story coming from D-Rock. He said he called Puff, and Puff came there. But if Puff would have came in the diner, they would have known something. He didn't come in the diner. He sent Cassie in there with the burners. And Cassie gave D-Rock the gun in the diner. Now, this is coming from D-Rock. The story Cassie told is that it was a whole different story from what D-Rock had told me, because D-Rock said he was in the diner himself, and Puff came down there with the guns, sent Cassie in there and gave him one, and was outside waiting on him to come outside. So that's the story that I knew, and I had already said that and expressed that in one of my shows before. Now, the story Cassie told, it was like she saw D-Rock and Puff both put on black and went to go unalive Suge. So those are two different stories that I know of. You know, one from D-Rock and the one we heard from Cassie. It may be the same story and Cassie just flipped it some kind of way, because D-Rock told me this years ago. And then maybe Cassie just, you know, flipped it in a certain kind of way because she took the gun to D-Rock, according to D-Rock.
The fallout from her testimony was immediate and explosive. Within hours, major news outlets plastered her allegations across headlines. They called her testimony deeply misleading and described the entire narrative as a sensationalized attempt to distort the truth. Diddy, the statement insisted, had acted purely as a father figure, and his motives had been unfairly twisted. Members of his inner circle echoed that message. Some called the accusations fabricated. Others hinted she had been manipulated by outside forces with something to gain. But one thing was impossible to ignore. Diddy himself remained silent. No appearance, no press conference, no direct statement. And in the court of public opinion, that silence spoke volumes. The impact rippled across his career. Brands began backing away. At least one major endorsement was put on pause. Music industry insiders whispered about canceled meetings and partners quietly reevaluating their ties. Diddy's once unshakable brand, the mogul, the hitmaker, the cultural icon, now bore the weight of something much heavier. This changes everything, one industry insider remarked. In this world, perception isn't just important, it's everything. And right now, his image is collapsing. But perhaps the most pressing question was what would come next. Had her testimony given prosecutors enough to act? Were there others, witnesses, victims, insiders, ready to step forward? Early reports suggested that investigators were already pursuing leads tied to the so-called freak-off gatherings. Prosecutors requested a deeper review of her claims. The judge signaled that the court was taking her statement seriously. Whether that would lead to new charges or trigger a larger investigation into Diddy's circle was still unknown. But one thing was certain: this was no longer just about one adoption. It had become a case about celebrity power without oversight, about a culture that rewards silence, and about what happens when the walls protecting the elite begin to crack. Diddy's legacy, built over decades through music, business, and cultural influence, now stood in the shadow of these revelations, and at the center of it all was a question far bigger than one man. How far can power go when no one is watching? The courtroom may be the current battleground, but what's unfolding is a reckoning, not just for Diddy, but for the systems that have shielded men like him for too long. This story is still developing, but one thing is clear: the silence is breaking, and what comes next could change everything.